Okay. All right. Looks like it says I'm live. There's some technical difficulties getting this set up. Normally I do this on Facebook, so this is my first time trying to do this on YouTube straight. So um, anyway, hello to anybody who's watching. Um, because this is a different interface, I'll just give some quick context that I'm doing a live stream each day as part of me showing up, trying to uh, trying to find a way to embody in interaction a particular way of being that um, allows a sort of larger picture that I have in mind to be able to transmit through me more clearly. So there are 14 other videos so far that give some more context. The first one gives a lot more. So this should all appear in a specific playlist that should be public on my page. So for today, what's particularly alive for me is I actually feel like I've gone through a significant amount of emotional shifting, and I have a very particular sensation in my emotional system that is like being able to breathe fully, like the capacity to take a deep breath into my entire body, like the sense of like having done some really good stretches, the way I can breathe deeply into my body. There's a sensation of being able to do that in my emotional body as well. The a lot of the arc of getting there had to do with really taking in a specific kind of move that I very often do in interacting with others that has really complicated my experience of interaction. So this is one that I see all the time. So I suspect this one generalizes possibly better than a lot of the other things that I've been talking about in this series. But one of them, this particular movement is, so this is in interacting with my partner, although this shows up in many cases other than just with her. There would be this welling up of, well, yesterday I had the welling up of a lot of reactions from a kind of anger, a triggeredness, a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of which ultimately didn't have anything to do with her. And I even knew that at the time, but I still felt this welling up of energy. And then a whole bunch of impulses, like wanting to get in an argument, wanting to be confrontational, wanting to accuse. And then my mind would put a kind of gate in front of that. It's like this energy wells up and wants to come forward, and then my mind goes, nope, like this does not look good to me. This will provide bad things. So I'm going to put my mind boom, right here and say, no, that energy needs to be filtered. It needs to be adjusted. So let's see, what kinds of tools are there? Well, there's nonviolent communication, some kind of methods of being able to say, when you said this, I felt this heat rising in my body. So going, okay, well, I can adjust it there. Or maybe the thing I need to do is just pause and take some breaths so that I can like calm down this energy so that this isn't interfacing with her directly. Or maybe there's some way that I can phrase what's coming up with me, because I want to be transparent too, right? It's important to be transparent about my feelings, like authenticity or something, right? And so like, how do I express it? Is there a way to express it that is clean? Like the MDC feels annoying, like it's somehow being dishonest. So when I talk about emotional post-production, that's the kind of phenomenon I'm referring to in terms of the title of this video. When this emotional upwelling that wants to come forward, and then the editing is happening after the emotion has already been produced. Part of the reason this is such an important thing for me is what I've come to observe is that, at least for me, if I'm already at that stage, it's way too late. In the sense that whatever caused the reaction, whatever triggeredness or upsetness there is in the interaction, is already there. So even if I successfully make that exchange very nice and pleasant and smooth, there's still this basic kind of friction that shows up, in that the cause hasn't been addressed. The fact was that she said something that was, like, from her experience, very innocuous. She told me about some travel plans that she had for the holidays. And this set me off. And there are clear reasons why. The details of those reasons are not relevant for this, and I don't plan on sharing them here. But the point is that, like, it was about that level of innocuous. She was just saying, "Oh, I'm going to do this," and my whole system kind of freaked out about it. So adjusting it so that we could have a smooth interaction there, and even so that I would be able to share with her, "I'm feeling really upset with you, but I'm trying to make sure that I'm being polite and that I'm caring for our connection." So the way that, for me, if I'm trying to control the other person's reaction with that kind of attention, with that sort of that attention to how my emotions are coming across, if I'm taking responsibility for her response or for any other person's response, there's a way where it actually becomes unsafe in general. If that's my strategy in general, it becomes unsafe for me to fully feel my feelings. There are certain kinds of reactions that it becomes unsafe for me to have. But if my strategy is to deal with it after it's already happened, then it's there. It's still going to sneak in sideways. So a tremendous amount of the processing that I've done over the last 2 days has been deepening a detail. Like, this thing about emotional post-production has been popping up over and over again in my thinking. I may have even mentioned it in earlier videos. But there's this feeling of I'm editing at the wrong end. I'm trying to affect how I'm presented instead of how I am. If how I am doesn't fit reality, if how I am doesn't fit with this other person or with the culture that I'm in, then there's a more basic problem than just how do I present. There's something going on in terms of how my emotions and my reactions are, how I relate to reality and truth, that runs very deep. So in this particular scenario with my girlfriend, like, we had this, like, a bit of friction that showed up, and I ended up saying something like, "I'm feeling quite activated. I'm trying to find a place from which I can speak cleanly." And what I mean by that, what I meant by that has to do with, can I come from a place where I'm not being victimized by her actions? Like being victimized is about an emotional orientation and a narrative that gets attached to an interaction. This is in the context of something that's called Karpman's triangle or the drama triangle. So in some sense, I'm saying I'm trying to find a place that isn't in the drama triangle in order to respond to you, in order to be able to interact with you. And I'm not able to find the place in me that lets me do that. This is part of that emotional post-processing. There's this sense of, I can tell it's victim, so I'm just going to filter here. Like, in some senses, that's useful. But part of the issue, and that became clearer when she and I talked about it again today, when we paused the conversation and went, it sounds like we need to take some space, cool down, because we don't want to engage in a conversation here where one of us is triggered and the other doesn't have the room to be able to hold space. That's not going to be very healthy for our connection, and it's not going to feel good. So let's create some space, process, and then come together the next day, which is today, and then sort some stuff out. And in the course of processing that, part of what became so clear to me was what I was upset about really had very little to do with her. It was more about a pattern that I was noticing in general I keep bringing to my interactions with people, but especially with romantic partners, having to do with taking responsibility for usually her interaction or her reactions to my way of being. And so going, oh yeah, it's very understandable that you would have you would you'd be overwhelmed, you're very busy, you're having this difficulty, so I won't burden you with my needs, my feelings, my experience in this situation. And like on one level that's very sensible, but on another, because the method that I was doing it was via this post production, it meant that I was still having all this stuff and then pushing it down. And this would create a sort of systematic way in which there were larger and larger sections of topics that I couldn't talk about. So a tremendous amount of my own processing was sort of bringing to culmination something I've been touching on for myself and inside myself for a couple of weeks, which is giving myself full permission to feel whatever I feel, to start from there. That has nothing to do with a strategy for interacting with other people. This has to do with getting clear on what is true for me in me. Then from in there, this is where that feeling of breath, of open breath that I was talking about at the start, really comes into fruition. It comes into this expansiveness, because if I can admit a way of, I do feel victimized. And I also feel some degree of shame about the fact that I feel victimized. Like I shouldn't feel victimized, like I shouldn't be in the drama triangle. And to notice that in myself and go, yeah, that is how I feel right now. And then I have room to bring this total acceptance, this expansive sense of a kind of joy, really. This joy in existing at all, experiencing at all. I then have room to bring that to my feelings and notice, yeah, it's okay that I feel this way. It's wonderful that I feel this way. And it also sucks. This is miserable. And that miserableness, that misery is amazing. I found, I mentioned some of this yesterday, that I could not, sometimes I just cannot find a place from which I can bring acceptance to what's going on. And that yesterday I actually needed help. I needed some kind of external support to give me an angle that would let me have the room to do this, which is itself kind of amazing. It's like, why would that ever be necessary? I don't think I ever successfully conveyed what the nature of my befuddlement is there. And that's okay. A little disappointing. There's some sadness about that. It is what it is. There's in coming to this vast acceptance of all the emotions, including honoring the fact that some of them really hurt. From that position, from that perspective, it becomes a lot more possible for me to notice what I really want and to make a bold move. So when coming into this particular video, for me there's a comparing two things. I'm comparing two sort of strategies for, well, if my innards aren't acceptable to the outside world, what do I do? One strategy is to filter and hide them and try to suppress the ones that don't fit the world so that I can interact with it and get it to do things that I want and maybe get it to match my needs, but I'll kind of have this interface, this filter, mostly a mental filter. At least that's how it works for me. But there's this is what I mean by emotional post-production. The emotion is produced and then there's post-production in order to edit its acceptability to the world. My feeling sense of it is that this is how most people work. I'm speaking from experience, not from anything like statistics or um, anything that resembles research. This is just me looking around and thinking about all the interactions I've had with people. um, and there's a different kind of strategy that has to do with noticing that if my feelings are incompatible with the way the world is, that is a description of a way in which how I am on the inside isn't true. This filter and the discomfort with hiding myself, but feeling like I have to play these games, it's like that's to some extent a description of the extent to which I am out of touch inside with reality. There's all kinds of objections that often show up here. I'm trying to be very clear about speaking for myself, but in terms of generalizing this, a very common kind of reaction, I imagine, goes something like, well, but come on, sometimes like people have reactions and they're not appropriate for the situation they're in. It's like, well, sure. That's definitely true of toddlers. I don't think toddlers get emotionally more mature just by suppressing their feelings. It's something more like they learn how to feel a range of feelings and they interface with people and there's a development that becomes possible. It's not like we're all constantly, well, arguably this is kind of true, but it's not like we're running around feeling like toddlers all the time. And then it just so happens that our adult minds are more booted up and can control our toddlerness. I don't think that's what emotions are about. It's not just this immature child running around inside. Although, like, arguably you could frame it that way, but I think there's a dishonesty about that. There's a significant dishonesty. There's something about the way that as we mature, part of what it means to mature is that even our impulses, even the desires that well up, are more complex. They are more fitted. They have more wisdom in them, more experience. So the like the kind of thing of where like a toddler, like I used to live with a toddler. Like a single mother is part of a group house that I was in, and this toddler just loved me. She thought I was the cat's pajamas, and I think this was because I could do sort of rough and tumble stuff with her, and a lot of the other adults didn't quite know how to do that. They weren't really comfortable physically and kind of energetically with that process. So she would just cackle when she would see me and run over and push me over, and then I would collapse dramatically, and then she would laugh and jump on me, and then she would bang her head ferociously on my chest, and I'm like, oh, glad I've got a tough chest, and I'm glad that she's made of rubber. There's something like, this is probably not a great habit to get into, kid. I'm glad you're having fun. Probably not great for your head. Also not so great for my chest. But this, I think for her, I think that this kind of excitement was part of what it meant for her to express, I like you. Is cackle and shove you over, or at least shove me over, because I would respond that way. And for the most part, like, so part of the reason I could relate to her so well is because I was kind of like that as a kid. like not in quite the same ways, a number of differences, but the amount of energy and physicality and go for it, like a lot of that was vividly in me, and to a very important extent it still is. I'm still just as active, just as intense, which is kind of the point. When I see someone I like and care about, when I see my parents, or I see an old friend, see my girlfriend in person, it's not like I get this overwhelming impulse to run over and shove them over while laughing. There's nothing like that. Instead, there's this immense complexity that arises. All of these senses of like liking and memory, and some elements of like, oh yeah, we had these good times together and those are over, and there's some sadness about that, and they kind of irritate me in these ways, and it's like the whole range of it. It's a very complex mix, and I can be aware of all of it. But all of that arises. What's the reaction? Well, it's complicated. It's not just complicated because my mind is complicated. It's not just because of what I'm thinking and what I put as a filter between me and the other person. What I even want to do is more nuanced than a toddler's. So if my reactions are not fitted to reality, the same way a toddler's reactions are sort of not fitted. I mean, they kind of are because they're a toddler. Everyone knows they're a toddler, and they sort of everyone gives them leeway. But they also give the toddler feedback of, like when she would go around and shove other people, they'd say, "It's not nice to push," which I thought was horrid feedback for a toddler. But that's how to parent is its own thing. I certainly have some opinions. Everybody has opinions. Because that's what it means to be human. We have opinions about how to deal with children. Um, but the thing is that there's I've said so many different threads here. What I'm trying to highlight is that there's a way to bring the emotions, the innards, in direct dialogue with reality. In practice, that's how toddlers grow up. They get this dialogue. When I'm doing post-production, and there's this filter between me and what's going on, such that my emotions don't get directly touched. They say, "How dare you?" And I feel this impact, but then I quickly but I'm justified in these ways, and let me think about how this. There's a way where creating this filter is slowing down the rate at which I can emotionally mature. Now, this does have a challenge, which is that, like with the conflict with my girlfriend, my reaction was not matured to a way that was fitted to the situation. That doesn't mean it was just false or bad. Part of the issue is that it had a tremendous amount of value in it that needed to be aired. And that was a key part of our conversation today, was getting into dialogue about, here is the value, and not just here is the value that this emotion had for me, but like really embodying it and going, I hurt, I'm scared, I'm sad, and I'm pissed. Being able to take down the post-production filter and give myself permission to feel these feelings. And part of that for me includes being willing to say, these feelings might be something like too raw for the situation. I might say some things that are a bit inappropriate. They might be a lot inappropriate. It's even possible that it could destroy our relationship. That's not what I want. And to the extent that I allow all of my feelings, hopefully that want comes through clearly as well. But I'm not willing to be in a relationship only if my feelings aren't allowed, and in particular, only if I do not allow, only if I am not allowing myself to have space to actually feel all of my feelings. So there's a riskiness. So I don't mean to just dismiss this concern of, well, what if the feelings don't fit the situation? Maybe they won't. Maybe they won't. Being willing to say, may I let the truth all the way in? May I grow with what I learn and show up 100%. That creates so much more space, because then I don't have to put any energy into this post-production. It's not necessary. It's just, there's no reason. There's a lot of freedom. So a lot of creating space for me, a lot of the resolution for this for me was noticing, oh, this is something I can devote to. It's terrifying to devote to it. Because what if I break things I care about? What if I make things hard that didn't have to be hard if I was willing to sort of uh, close myself up a little bit. And basically, for me, the choice is clear. I want to be mature in a way that allows my whole being to evolve in dynamic dance with truth. I want that more than I want a specific relationship or a specific situation. Part of that comes from a trust that I have built, that I've experienced, that this kind of attitude, this sort of orientation, this openness gives me room to make it really brief. It gives me room to create magic. I mean that metaphorically, but also if you're going to call something magic, that's magic. Um, what kind of way of showing up creates opportunities, invites people in, opens up possibilities, and starts to move desire, starts to actually move desire. Right? That's a very somatic thing. It's an erotic thing. Like we can go down a whole arc about how that roots in eroticism. But this embodied display where it's not just an intellectual exercise with these points that I'm trying to make, where there's lots of logical ideas and you can think through them and be really impressed and even recognize, that makes sense. Maybe I should do that. Where all the energy is in the head instead of really being here. Me really feeling the presence of my being and showing up. And inviting the people I speak to do the same by my embodying the example. So, to a large extent, I feel like today was a relevant fulfillment to some degree of the whole reason for doing this series of 100 Days of Live. There's a lot more to go. I want to deepen this. I can still feel how much I still kind of glance away from some of the feelings that happen inside of me. It's like just bringing a really vivid, clear awareness to that. It's an ongoing process. But I can now breathe into my emotional body much more freely than I've been able to over the last week. And I earned it. I learned. It's not a mystery to me. Except the part where I needed to talk to Malcolm. So it looks like by the magic of technology, nobody was able to hop onto this one, which is totally fine. I'll see about uploading this over to Facebook as well. I know I could just link to the YouTube thing, but there's a Facebook's algorithms are weird. So if you watch all the way here, thank you for watching. And my hope, we'll see what happens. I'm taking this day by day, but there's an excitement for me about some of the things that strongly want to come through me, and some of the clarity of, oh, that's the tone. That's what I want to say and bring. Not so much just as a matter of teaching, although practicing sharing what I have from this space is really important to me. So, yeah, I've got some stuff to bring. And I hope you want to tune in.